Good evening. My name is Jennifer, and this is the Sarabella, where we talk about all things related to ADHD, autism, mood disorder, schizophrenia, addiction, parenting, life, beliefs, judgments, and just wanting to live at um, a place of peace and joy. And I am so thankful to be here. It is been a minute since I've been able to sit down and just enjoy sharing my thoughts, sharing my work. And tonight we're going to be talking about beliefs, judgments. And I originally started this podcast because I was delving into a lot of work related to highly sensitive people. I researched the genes that are specifically associated with highly sensitive people and what all of those genes really tell us. And I have not lost focus of that. My work is really to understand that genetically how we come into this world, what those genes do to help and sometimes hinder us in the way that we perceive and the way that we handle stress and or the way our body regulates neurotransmitters and the way that we are sensitive towards our environments, our nervous systems, even before we were born, things that were out of our control, being able to be at a place where we can accept that, understand that, give ourselves so much grace and acceptance for the way God created us and what we can do to be more and more aware so we don't become dysregulated and our personalities don't become disordered, as we say. So this week I was at a Bible study and just um, love God's word and just being able to reflect on it in so many different ways, depending on the seasons and the day and what is coming up for me. And that's the beauty of studying and learning about ourselves. And my work is not only to try to teach people how to love themselves in such a mighty way and be so curious about themselves that they become just full of love, approval, and acceptance for themselves, not needing external validation or approval for anything. And I think um, this journey has really taught me to be so in love with God and just what He does and the ability to know that with Him we're enough and self-sufficient. So we were talking about Paul, and I never realized how much I relate to Paul and his desire to be self-sufficient, and it just made me reflect on how God knows us. He created us, and in that Bible study, we did debate a little bit about the thorn in the side and maybe what that is. And in my perspective, I was like, it doesn't really matter what the thorn was. The thorn was to have him deeply rely on God and whatever he needed to do to be able to every breath, every moment that he had to look in order to be where he needed to be. And God knew him so well. And I love it always that God uses just dysregulated, just imperfect people. And I bring all that up to say that one of the challenges that I have noticed with autism, with ADHD, with um, whatever that branch of tree is that at times has gotten my mind dysregulated. It's been a powerful place to question my beliefs and my judgments, not my spiritual beliefs, but the beliefs that come up in my head that in the past have tried to destroy me and to really quantify what voice that is in my head and whether really question everything that comes up. And one of the things I want to share tonight is some work that my coach actually turned me on to. That for me, because I have been in years past, maybe not so many recent head case, and um, I'm an acceptance of that. You know, that's the curiosity of who we are, knowing that we were created in such a way, and being able to know that it's okay to be exactly where we are, but knowing that we want to grow and change. And one of the things that she exposed me to was a lady called Byron Katie. And Byron Katie has an amazing story, but basically, she really created these worksheets and a process to question the projector, our head, in the way that we envision life and the way that we see things. And really, her philosophy is nothing in our head is true. And she is not a Christian, she is not a believer, but I've been able to accept and to understand things and bring it into a place where it makes sense for myself. And I want to share the things, and that's the whole point of being curious, and for you to figure out what works for you. These are all tools that have been beneficial for me, and I have seen it in my practice on a continual basis, and really try to teach my clients about um, uh, the beliefs and questioning them, and really turning that around to give them exactly what they need. And the awareness of how many beliefs that come up that we dismiss, but our body stores them in a mighty way. And that's what usually leads to people coming in a dysregulated crisis trauma, that they've let too many beliefs build up to where it's now come to a place of incapability to ignore them. So I'm going to share my screen with you in the hopes that I can do this so well. And um, the first thing that I'm going to share with you are what she calls catechisms, which I love. And I always tell people that I work with, if you can't do anything, then memorize these. And really, what they are, they're a refocus to come into yourself, to know that you are your biggest problem. As Taylor Swift says, it's me, I'm the problem. And it's really a mentality that we project and we shame, and we have such a narcissistic spirit to want to change people from where they are and who they are, and make them into this idealized version of who they want them to be, which creates very toxic relationships, and just an idealized version of somebody that's not there, because we're so dissatisfied with ourselves, and so um, not aware of who we are. And so some of these catechisms I love. When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. She's just brilliant, and just kind of realizing, my favorite one is, if you think somebody else is your biggest problem, you're insane. It's um, really coming into when you blame and when you project, and it's when you're judging, and um, realizing that it's just the coping mechanisms to um, push everything away into somebody else, not wanting to evaluate yourself. And it's such a child mind. It's such a child, immature mind of the way that we cope, that we've justified. And it is growing into the spiritual maturity of, energetically wanting to just remove that, everything that is outside of you, which we know that your shadow is those parts, it's the fragmented parts that are outside, and wanting that integration, the internal family systems to be able to be fully integrated, that the beliefs of a child that tinge and they hurt, to work through. Another one that she has on here: when I am perfectly clear what is what I want. Arguing with reality is like trying to teach a cat to bark. It's hopeless. So that is the other thing, that the beliefs take us away from, either we're in the past or the future. And so the work, and wherever you are at spiritually, Jesus was always present. He was always present. The model of what he came to earth to convey is a I'm in my father's house right now. When he went away to pray, to be by himself, he was present in the moment, meditating on where he needed to be. And part of it is, some of us more than others struggle with being present. The dysregulation, the trauma, the fragmentation, the perception of our lives keep us in a past of entrainment. Whatever we were entrained with mother and father, that we have not been able to rise against, to really know that nothing of that is true. And it is, it's a process. And I say some more than others. 20% of the population is highly sensitive. 20% of those people are usually the people that um, have the most vulnerability to personality disorders, to dysregulation. It's a reward deficiency syndrome in the way that the body uses the neurotransmitters. Some of that was you couldn't have prevented it. And that's why I encourage the genetic testing, because we need to know what we came into, that we had really no choice but to be aware that how our environment affected us, and being able to, work backwards to dismiss and to really argue against what we have believed in our head. I know Eckhart Tolle is another one that I love, that talks about the pain body. He has a little bit more extreme, where Byron Katie is really going through the beliefs to question them. And I'll show you the worksheet and just work through one quickly to see the beauty of the work. And, Eckhart Tolle is really like, we don't want to give pain body any energy, really coming back into the present, and more a Buddhist mentality of being present and retraining the mind, not to even give it energy. There is no I and me. And it is in awareness to wherever you want to be. I love this work. I have my beliefs, and I have the things that have worked for me. And my hope in always doing the podcast is to convey a message of search for what works for you. Evaluate, um, and question everything. If you're a believer, being in tune with God's word. If you're a Buddhist, what aligns for you, that is brings you to your highest and best good, to get you to a mind that's like clear and free, in every way, to be able to see and be love, and be in a conscious way of being present, and not being in a subconscious mind of letting it destroy you and your relationships and your quality of life. Um, the other one that I'll go through, no one can hurt me. That's my job. You know, I think it becomes an honesty of you evaluating yourself, and how much, we are, on the drama triangle of persecuting and rescuing and being a victim. For a while last year, that was my work that I had to do, to constantly question how I was creating really my own dopamine by creating chaos in my life, the up and down, when there was no drama, feeling like an empty vessel, of not having any stimulation in any way, because I've been in a chronic pattern of creating drama to get some type of high, whether it was, a cortisol dump, or, really getting excited about somebody that I was in a relationship with, until it didn't really serve me anymore. I had to be honest, what I did to drive to persecute my ex-husband, to, create drama where there is not, or make him be the bad guy. I got something out of it, and I had to question myself constantly, to really just be in the state of peace. And it was so hard. I'm not going to lie. I found myself constantly wanting to create drama, in a relationship that I had a hard time letting go, of persecuting and rescuing, and being the hero, and wanting to victimize myself, and wanting that person to be somewhere that they weren't. And that is just so dysfunctional. Um, and then the worst thing that she says on her, the worst thing that I has ever happened is an unquestioned thought. And I will put in the chat her website, and she has a weekly podcast where she basically helps people refute their thought. And it's amazing how she turns it around. People so entwined with the belief that they want to hold on to, or are so entwined with the judgment that they just can't let go. And the beauty of turning that around, that it's all about you being as petty as you want to be with that person. In reality, it's that mirror that we don't sometimes want to look at, that whatever, we see in them, sometimes we have to be able to look and say, where have I been in my life? What is it? It's just so ugly that I can't look at in that other person, that I just don't want to look at in myself. The honesty. And that is the amazing thing. And so I'm going to hopefully be able to share this screen. Yes. Never perfection. Always a work in part. Hold on one second. Love, love, love that there's so much grace and kindness. All right. So this is her worksheet. So again, she has a one that's it's a judgment worksheet when I'm not tongue-tied. But this is the one that just really started my work. And I did probably, I don't know, 200 of these. She also has an app that was super beneficial for me because out and about. And the beauty of this work is, for me, because I was such a head case, it was hard for me to come into my body. I could rationalize it in my head and have this brilliant thing, but it was still in my head. And I had to kind of come into a place where it was a felt sense of being really aware of when, I call it, when my body tinged, when I felt some sensation, when I felt an uncomfortability, the discomfort in my body with, and my coach was so beautiful and to work through these as I did. And eventually it was a process of, can you just sit with the feeling without the story? And that's the beauty of this work. This is the first layer, and if you are interested in that, she has workshops, but really reading it's called the little book, reading that little book to just kind of bring awareness to the beliefs in your head, going through this process several times. And as you go through the process, it becomes very automatic to really just refute anything that comes aligned. And really, that's what God's word calls us to do when we call to renewing of our mind. There's so many verses, and called us to, the renewal of the mind, Romans 12:12, to not conform to this world, but renew your mind, renew your mind, renew your mind. She is, like I said, not a believer, but it is a process. Whatever works to basically retrain your mind to know that nothing in your head is true. The lies that we believe, and wherever you're at, to be able to refute this. So this is one of the things, again, I'm going to share. So this is a worksheet. And so I will just go through one with you. And usually you can do this when you get really good at it in about 5 or 10 minutes. So one of the main things that came up, when I was doing this work was that I was damaged. I believed that I was damaged and I don't know how to do a relationship, so I wanted to quit. So when we go through that, we question ourselves. We question that belief. Is it really true? Is it really true I'm damaged and don't know how to do a relationship? Yes or no? No, it's not true. Can you absolutely know it's not, that it's, if you said yes, you would say, can you absolutely know it's true? In a court of law, if you had all the proof, could you prove it? And most of the time that your answer should be no. How do you react what happens when you believe that thought? For me, how do I react? I feel like I fail. I I felt like I failed because I could not get it right. I could not be calm in myself. I could not stop doing the push and pull to be calm within myself, to allow another person to be exactly where it was, to not perform and be perfect and allow myself to be. And when that happened, that failure mentality made you push. I pushed you away before you could push me away. I believe that you don't want me because I can't sit still, or I can't be calm, or um, I can't just enjoy and be present in the moment. What emotions when you believe that thought? I feel sadness. I feel frustration. I feel desperation. I feel uh, chaos. I feel like I want to withdraw. I feel um, um, damaged. I feel um, depressed. I feel anxious. A number of emotions come up just in that minute when I feel that way. Does that thought bring you peace or stress? Always stress. It always being stress. And that's what we're trying to do in this work. You will always do these beliefs because we want peace that we've never known, the peace that surpasses all understanding. It always brings you stress when you believe a thought. What images do you see, past, present, past, and future, when you believe that thought? For me, I had failed at every single relationship. The majority of my life, I was using drugs and alcohol. So I used some sort of excuse that I couldn't be present, or I enjoyed that relationship because I was high. That I always had a means to escape, and mentally and physically. um, Past, having people that were unfaithful that I had to investigate and, persecute, and um, feeling like I couldn't trust, relationships with friendships, having to leave friendships, having, best friends in high school, junior high that just were dismissive, that I just couldn't be, I think, who I want to be. What addictions, obsessions begin to manifest when you believe that thought? I obsess more about what the other person's thinking, what they must think of me. It becomes so external, and I give them so much power. Um, and most of the time I have found, especially with I know more now about the autistic brain and the ADHD, the rejection syndrome, just so afraid of being rejected and abandoned, and trying to read other people's emotions that I've always got wrong. I thought I was so empathetic, and I don't use that word for myself anymore, and I don't really use the high sensitivity, although I know I have those genes and understand them more. But being so empathetic, thinking I could understand, when I just misread all the time. I misread social cues. I misread what you believe, and it's so inaccurate, which drove so much pain for myself. That obsession, that I thought I know what you think, and then I play into it. Such a disaster. Describe the physical sensations, just painful, like closing up my throat, not being able to share myself, not wanting to be close and intimate, physical pain, sadness. How do you treat that other person when you believe that? I always pushed, I always withdraw, I always persecuted. You are the bad guy, because I just could not sit with the pain that was in myself. How do you treat yourself when you believe that thought? I beat myself up. I'm not in acceptance. I feel like a failure. I feel like there's something dysfunctional, wrong at a foundational level of not being able to get it right. Next page. Who would you be without that thought? Here's where we go to the beauty of the work. Who would you be without that thought? Who would I be without that thought if I didn't believe that I was damaged and didn't know how to do a relationship? If I walked in my essence and knew that I was able to have a healthy, amazing relationship, that I wasn't damaged. That God created me to be the most beautiful person, but I have not allowed myself to be my authentic version, to allow myself to be that other person, to be exactly where they were in their beauty of all God created in myself as well. More beauty when we turn it around. This is the part that sometimes people get a little confused on. So turning around to the self, I am not damaged. I am able to have a healthy relationship. If this were about somebody else, but you can also turn around to the other. I am healthy. I am healthy. I am more than capable of doing a healthy relationship. I have healthy ways to cope and to engage in life. I allow myself to be to the opposite, you know. Again, it's I'm not damaged, you know. I am a lovely creature. I am uh learning and so graceful to myself. uh I am perfect exactly the way I am. And some people would say it's affirmations. It is kind of at the ends, but it is kind of, reframing that thought to have an effective new feeling. In counseling, we call this like DBT, the retraining the thoughts in a different way to have an effective outcome. Somewhat similar, whatever works for you, to basically reframe the thought. And I love this process because it's a process of being able to slow down the thoughts. For me, although I'm in the head, I need a process in order to dispel the beliefs, the declarations of speaking it out loud. And this was a great avenue for me. You need to find what works for you, and there's so many beautiful tools. The dangerous part is when we don't question our beliefs. I have an opportunity to work right now in family law. And my God has given me the opportunity because of the work that I've done. You know, I have to be in a place of half and half, before I have my official internship. I see the beauty of people being at a place of where they're at, not wanting them to be anywhere they're not. So fascinated at how the beliefs can quickly lead to violence, can quickly lead to anger, aggression, abusive, using children as weapons. I wasn't sure why I got into family law, and I probably won't be there long because it's definitely a different animal. But what I do get to be is God's presence every single day to people that are in the most detrimental, most highly volatile, a lot of times emotional state. And I get to help regulate them. And I also get to empathize with them, having gone through a similar situation. God uses every pain for a purpose if we let it. I am so honored to be able to share what I can. Like I said, it's a work in progress. I allow myself to be exactly where I am today. I'm 100% responsible for where my life is today. And I have choices. And I have a God that is restoring me more and more each day. And I pray wherever you're at that you continue to challenge your thoughts, to speak your truth, to see the beauty of God created, to knowing that you don't have to have anything external to regulate you, to approve of you, to be able to be whole and free and at peace. My name is Jennifer, and we'll see you next time.